This is ironic coming from the meat mafia, but I think our show is much more than just you eating a 100% carnivore diet. That's really not what we're preaching at all.
There's people that will die on the hill that vegetables are toxic. There's people that will die on the hill that animals are toxic. I think the hill that I'm willing to die on is that.
Dude, we could have just summarized the whole podcast. The wake-up call has happened. I think just trying to really be people who are willing to like stand out, boldly lead, invite people in, create community, like those types of things can change a city. And I think changing a city could change everything.
Which is why it's so important for everyone listening and just get in the game. Whatever get in the game means to you. Maybe it's just sharing a podcast that you think is impactful or buying a grass-fed steak and giving it as a welcome present to your friend. These little ripples, dude, end up creating massive momentum.
Yeah, everything. All right, Meat Mafia, welcome back to another episode of the one and only Meat Mafia podcast. On today's episode, Brett and I dive deep into our general feelings around what is happening in the health and wellness space right now. We've talked so much about, with so many amazing guests, just around how to get healthy, brands that are going to help you get healthier, practical advice. And honestly, this episode was really Brett and I just taking a moment to capture really our philosophy around what is truth in the health and wellness space and what is maybe some of the noise. So in this episode, you'll hear us talk about the power of simplifying your health to the point that you don't actually have to think about it 24/7 and that you can actually just embrace the lifestyle of living a healthy life. We also talk about resiliency and flexibility, how to enjoy life, travel, and social events without feeling so restricted that you can't actually enjoy your life, but also weighing that with the fact that you want to be healthy and that you want to actually be doing these things that support great health. So this is an amazing episode. We talk about the culture, how we are truly just passionate about changing the culture around health right now and just getting the conversation very forward about just being healthier. And truthfully, this is our core mission, is to just get people healthier and get people excited about the idea that being healthy is actually fun and cool and enjoyable. So this episode will spark a fire under you and make you want to be part of this movement. So we are very excited to release it. Before we get into the episode, I just want to give a quick word about some things that we've got going on. Most importantly, our brand, Noble Origins, which is a beef protein powder that includes collagen, colostrum, and an organ complex, is back in stock this week. Yes, we are going to be back in stock this week at the end of the week with chocolate and vanilla fully back in stock. We're so excited. This has been an incredible journey for us the last year in terms of building this company out, doing the podcast, and just trying to grow into different roles. So we're incredibly excited to get product back in stock. Go check out our site at nobleorigins.com to get your product today. Also, before you leave into the episode, we have an amazing community of people over on Telegram that is linked in the show notes. This is exclusively for our podcast members who listen to the show. This is not something that we share on social media. This is exclusively for the airwaves. And we just want to create a community of cool people who are listening to the show. So go check out that Telegram community and we'll share all sorts of stories, pictures, things that we've got going on. So go check that out. And also give us a quick follow on Instagram and Twitter. We love you guys. Thank you guys so much. And now for the episode. The first episode back in the new space.
Dude, it looks amazing.
I love it.
Sky and the boys did a great job. Yeah, we're back at Squatch, which is the gym that we've been going to for the last 3 years in the east side of town.
Feels like a good home game.
It's
getting back on home turf.
It's such a special place. So many good memories here. In their studio, it looks amazing. Just redoing it, it just feels very homely. So just excited to be getting back here and just recording some good eps.
It kind of ties into what we're going to talk about, which is like, I feel like they just simplified this space so much. Like there was so much clutter in here beforehand.
Yes.
And then they just made this space so simple, but looks amazing.
It looks great. Yeah, excited to see what's to come. But yeah, I think simplifying and clutter is a really good choice of words to just describe just the overall nutrition space, the health and wellness space. We were talking in the car. We had a couple different topics that we were ideating on. And I think we're actually finding the more that we do this, the more natural we keep it, where you're not super rehearsed. Ideas are just flowing to you organically. I think the better the conversation is.
Definitely.
And so we've probably been tinkering with our diets for what, close to a decade? Probably 8 years for me.
I'm a little longer than that, probably.
Yeah, because I didn't really start tinkering until I went carnivore, but you were paleo in college, right? Weren't you?
Yeah,
You were
like
one of those freaks that was dialed in.
my freshman year, I was like doing paleo and not boozing, and everyone was like,
What's wrong with this guy?
But yeah, I mean, my high school, when I was I trained at a gym called Prospects in Tyson's Corner, Virginia, and it was like Eric Cressy, so the baseball performance coach, Eric Cressy, he made a name for himself really early as probably the most science-backed performance coach in baseball. And so he had a lot of disciples, and I wouldn't say that my trainer worked directly with him, but he took a lot of his ideas and inspiration from him. So all the training was incredibly functional, really focused on just moving your body correctly. And in baseball, it's super important because all the movements you're doing are unilateral. Like your swing is just one direction all the time. So you really need to train yourself to work out different imbalances that are just naturally going to occur through playing baseball. So they were really focused on that. And I was like a sponge. I was in there every day, loved being there. It was like a second home. And there was one guy there. He was like a cheerleader at Virginia Tech. And he was like all in. I mean, he was buying raw milk from the Amish back in 2011.
He was a cheerleader?
Dude, he was all
probably
in.
a unit.
He was a unit. He was completely jacked.
And he was buying raw milk from the Amish?
Buying raw milk from the Amish and buying eggs from the Amish and meat. And like he would drive to Pennsylvania, which is like 2 hours away, just to get all of his food. So that was like, I think that relationship, I hadn't fully turned the corner on nutrition, but I had been interested. I had done I had read Tim Ferriss stuff and listened to his stuff. I think 4 Hour Body came out when I was in college, but I would listen to his podcast a lot, and he talked about fasting a lot. And fasting was definitely something I came to early on because it just always felt good fasting. But I just say that because that was when like my wheels started turning back then, 2012, around nutrition. And I had struggled with like acne in high school, which was like part of the reason I like completely ignored nutrition as a factor in that. But part of the reason why I started getting more dialed in on the nutrition front was, man, like, I'd run into some health stuff, really wanted to figure that out. And then in college, I was much more focused on the performance side of things, just trying to get better and better. So that was a long-winded way of saying like early college, I was focused on nutrition, and just by eating a paleo diet I was in insane shape. I was working out all the time during the summer and just eating really clean, and found that I was just like feeling as good as I possibly could at 18, 19 years old, which is a huge blessing at the time looking back, just having that insight into the important things and just being able to dive into that. So from there, messed around with, I stopped playing after my sophomore year. So junior and senior year, I really regret this, but wasn't really as dialed in on the nutrition stuff, was studied abroad, and then was focused on working. I worked my entire senior year and then graduated and just kind of, didn't really focus too much on the nutrition stuff, and then got back into it, 1 or 2 years after graduating, doing keto diet, animal-based, carnivore. So just went down that whole rabbit hole.
Yes.
Long-winded way of telling my nutritional story.
You just gave me the full biography on every piece of food you've eaten, which I love.
Any questions?
But I think the important thing is you've essentially been like tinkering and developing intuition for a decade. And even when you think about, I remember Tim Ferriss was like the first guy to talk about the slow carb diet. So like integrating carbohydrates, whether you're training or not, which I think is a really good framework. And I have a lot of respect for guys like that cheerleader at VodTech that were buying raw milk back in the day.
Dude.
Like Stan Efferding was one of those guys too, where he was really skinny and then he lived on one of his family members' farms and started like drinking full cream milk and regenerative beef and all this stuff. And it kind of helped him build that blueprint, which is awesome. But I mean, the last few years with just the pace of social media and the amount of content, I feel like there is so much good where there's almost like this food renaissance that's happening where people are waking up around topics like meat and saturated fat and connecting with ranchers and experimenting with different diets and biohacking practices and things like that. There's like this incredible awakening. And then I also feel like maybe due to the low barrier to entry of social media, there's just a lot of noise out there.
Yeah.
And there are a lot of people that I think almost there's incorrect information. There's a lot of fear porn, a lot of fear mongering, and there's people that are also making, I feel like, health and wellness become the sole part of their identity. I don't know if I'm describing that the right way, but my point in saying this is like for the average person that is trying to just push themselves in the right direction, whether it's like lose 20 pounds and get their hormones better, increase their energy levels, their testosterone, whatever that is. I think it's really tough for a lot of people actually to like grasp the right information that they need. What do you think about that? Do you think there's truth to that?
100%. I think when you're over inundated with information,
Yeah.
at least myself, I get like paralyzed with that stuff.
Yeah.
It's like, all right, you're just throwing too much stuff at people who are just looking for the basic answers. And Instagram's just a great place to go. Like, I think a lot of people probably have a relationship with their phone where, they go to Instagram and they don't even realize what they're consuming, but it's just like constant. The fear aspect of what you're talking about stands out to me the most, just because I think on one hand, it's influencers or people who are trying to grow a following, realizing that fear plays online. So they're just doubling down on that. But then on the other side of that, it's just consumers kind of almost getting off to the fact that like some of the things that they're being told, it's like validating some of their ideas around like, oh, everything out there is like, bad and
Poison
and all this stuff. It's really a negative lens on health. And I think that you and I are definitely of the thinking that we should just approach this whole topic of conversation from a completely different lens, trying to just be the light and focus on the things that are most important and applying that 80-20 principle to health and wellness. Cause that's really where, like when we're talking about people seeing transformation, the 80-20 principle is where that will happen. And then, maybe once you kind of fix a few of the big pillars, then you kind of go down some of these other rabbit holes and start fixing some other things. What do you think about that?
I think you make a good point. And I think we maybe were unintentionally guilty of this, more so because when we started, I think we were learning so much. We were bursting at the seams just to tell a lot of people these fundamental stories or things about the food system that explain why we're so metabolically broken as a society. But I think it's easy I think once you learn about human psychology and you realize that fear porn, scare tactics, storytelling, that stuff absolutely works. It's like you're telling these statistics around, 85% of the beef supply being monopolized or 10 companies controlling all the products in the grocery store. That's more so, the stakes, and the stakes aren't great at a macro level. But the most important thing that should give everyone hope is that you ultimately have control over every single bite of food that goes into your system. So it's more so like you understand the context of the situation, but then there are so many different things that you can be doing to ultimately have that resilience, which I think that's probably the biggest thing that you and I have shifted in terms of our thinking is developing resilience.
Yeah. And trying not to get into the labeling of just the different diet cultures. I think it can be really toxic, and you start to like wrap your identity around. This is ironic coming from the meat mafia, but I think our show is much more than just like you eating 100% carnivore diet. Like that's really not what we're preaching at all. It's a tool. And then there's so many other important things that you need to like factor into what you should be eating. And yeah, I don't think that the diet culture in general is healthy just because we stake our entire identity. I think a lot of people stake their entire identity around what camp they fall in.
Yeah. Yeah. It's something I've spent more time thinking about because I don't know if I would be sitting here in this capacity if it wasn't for all these incredible people, these pioneers that were sharing the playbook to follow a carnivore diet. Sean Baker's being one of them, the Chafees, the Ken Berries, and then all these kind of anonymous people on Reddit that were quietly following this diet for like 20 years before I'd ever done it. And I really tapped into those stories. And my thought process was, well, if conventional medicine is pulling me in this direction, I don't feel great and I'm on all these drugs, but these people are going a different path and they're getting off those drugs. that's ultimately the outcome that I want to engineer for myself.
Mm-hmm.
And I think a lot of people, because the podcast is called Meat Mafia, and because people remember stories, so people will gravitate towards a story like mine, they blanket assume that I'm carnivore 24/7, which I completely understand. But maybe we could talk a little bit, like when you hear the word resilience, because it's something you and I,
Mm.
like whether we're on camera or off, like when we're living together or whatever, and we talk about resilience, what does resilience mean to you in the context of health or life?
I think it's having more multiple pillars of your health that are growing and working together in tandem at the same time. So, like when I think about resilience from a health standpoint, it's, you know, just doing some of the basics really well, like having those non-negotiables of how many steps I'm going to get, just being really dialed in on getting the right amount of sleep. And I'm saying like steps and sleep, I think if you're 90% of the time, 80% of the time focusing on just doing those things
Mm,
well, so much of your health outcomes from there are just going to be better. Like if you're walking, you're getting outside, your like blood sugar is probably more regulated because
mm,
you're just getting a low level amount of cardio in. And it's like not any extra strain on your body.
yeah.
Um, so I think having those basic pillars just really dialed in. I would add community to that too. Like I think if
Mm,
you're around like healthy people and have healthy relationships, like it just feeds into this equation of resiliency. And then yeah, I think like those three as a starting point. Just making sure you're rested, you're moving a bare minimum amount every single day, and then you also have other people in your life who are kind of just leading the same life and have
mm.
similar values.
When you're speaking, it just I think this is so true. Literally every facet of life. Like, I think it's so important to, when you're going through tough situations or you're trying to improve your health or you're trying to figure out this business decision that you need to make, literally break it down as if like a 5-year-old tries to understand the situation.
Well, that's luckily I have the IQ of a five or like the
Of a
mental capacity of
baboon.
a 5-year-old.
Yeah.
So
But it's everything we're talking about is very simple. The execution is not the
mm,
easiest thing in the world. And to piggyback off of what you're saying, when you're speaking, I'm thinking resilience to me is this feeling of having great energy from the time I wake up to
mm,
the time I go to bed, where I'm not overthinking my meals. Like I genuinely am enjoying the taste of them. I'm enjoying the function of the meals. They're nourishing my body. They're high in protein. They're high in these different types of micronutrients. I'm not overthinking. I'm not stressing. I'm able to work out 1 to 2 times a day if I want. If I miss my workout, I know that my playbook, the blueprint that I built for myself is still so good. Just like baking in 15,000 steps, throughout the day, whether it's like the first 15 minutes when I wake up, 10 minutes after a meal for digestion, maybe I take 1 or 2 walking calls. And then the kicker is taking out the shame and morality around these like non-tribal foods. So
mm,
resilience to me is you and I doing the right things when we live together throughout the week. So we can go to our buddy's wedding in North Carolina, have a couple drinks, get a crappy 3-hour night of sleep. Maybe I go back to New Jersey and have a couple slices of pizza. And it doesn't bother me because I know that God has made us to be unbelievably resilient, and you take care of yourself automatically throughout the week so that you can actually go enjoy your life or maybe pull an all-nighter or have a couple extra drinks. Like
yeah.
I think this over rigidity is what causes a lot of people to then binge and make these diets not sustainable.
Yeah. Like part of me really resonates with like the machine brain where it's like, oh, I'm just gonna like, optimize to every single extreme and operate a certain way, like in every single occasion. But I feel like is meant to be enjoyed in certain areas, like the wedding. It's like you should be building resiliency through the week to be able to go, once a quarter to go and have an amazing time with your friends. And that doesn't need like that can also be done in a healthy way too. You don't need to necessarily stay up until 2, 3 a.m. to enjoy that time or get completely plastered. But having a few drinks and being in the moment is definitely better than being the guy who's like, no, I'm not gonna have like a piece of the wedding cake or, like because I think people do walk themselves into those types of corners. And in extreme situations, maybe it makes sense. Like I don't want to like rule that out, but I think for most people, it's like take care of yourself 6 days a week, so that on that seventh day, you can maybe loosen up a little bit. And I think for me, it's like if one day out of the month, I'm able to just like kick it and enjoy myself and do like go, I don't even know what my guilty pleasures really are. Like go get some ice cream, then I'll go do that.
Yeah.
Um,
But you're not sitting in shame though,
yeah,
because
no,
Harry knows that he's doing the right things. And dude, like something that you and I really bonded over when we first started the brand was like this kind of like love and wonderment for the way Anthony Bourdain lived his life.
definitely.
And I love watching his videos, and there are so many comments that will people that just miss him so much. And
Mm,
he had this rare quality where you felt like you were best friends with him, even if you had never met him before.
yeah,
And I feel like one of the things that I've admired about you is that you've traveled a lot and you've lived in Europe and all these different countries. And I remember when I was really dialed in a carnivore, I was so mission focused on healing. And then I also had this love of Bourdain. And I'm like, like when if I want to go explore Italy or some of these villages or travel around the world, like, am I not going to eat all these like pastas and tomato sauces and gelatos and have a beer? And I don't know. I was just like, I think life is just very, very short at the end of the day. And I
yeah,
think food, whether it's super healthy or not healthy, is just this bonding experience. And I think one of the things I've decided last year, and you have too, is like, I don't want to live my life without being able to chase those experiences as well. And I'm not
mm,
saying that as an excuse to eat like crap, but I want to take care of myself so I can reward myself and see all that the world has to offer before my time on the planet is done.
dude, it's such a good point. And as you were talking, I was thinking about my time in Italy because I was living with a host family over there, and culturally it was very different around the just culture around food was very different. Like you would 100% of the time sit down and eat breakfast with your family, and the breakfast would usually be insanely small. It would be like an espresso, and like a lot of times they would have like a little biscuit with it. So,
That's it.
dude, or like a piece of fruit, something incredibly small, but just to like get your day going. And so even there, it's like you think about the American breakfast. A lot of people are either like, you know, maybe over indexing, choosing not to eat breakfast at all, which I actually enjoy. Like, that's worked really well for me. Or, they're eating some like Pop Tart or something that is just going to cause them to crash for the
Mm,
rest of the day. But the element of it being like a meal with your family at the beginning of the day, that's small. You're getting a coffee in there too. Like it was something that made me pause. I was like, wow, it's really different. And then, they'll have a light lunch back at home. So breakfast and lunch are very light. And then they'll have a dinner that is usually like protein centered, like fish was often on the menu or like some sort of meat dish and then like pasta on the side. But it was never eating, like, I just remember the portions always being like very appropriate and they walk a ton,
mm.
you know, they're outside a ton. They hang out, after work, they'll go get a beer with a friend and they won't drink to excess, but they'll go sit outside, walk around. There's just a different lifestyle over there. And I feel like just the US, it's tough to live that way, but if you can be mindful of it, they're just like born into it. They don't
Yeah.
they don't know any different.
Yes.
But I think they're in general a lot healthier.
Well, one of the things that you've said is that there's almost no option. There's the only option when you're in a country like that is to be healthy because these healthy practices are just baked into the culture.
Yeah.
So like whether you're thinking about it or not, like you're having a black espresso, something small, so you're in a caloric deficit, you're eating real food, some pasta, some grains, whatever, but it's all really pure quality food. And from a macronutrient perspective, you're probably maintaining or you're in a deficit. But I think moving your body is so important. And I do think that there are a lot of people in the health and wellness space that are like, it's all nutrition. Don't worry about exercise. Exercise can even be detrimental. And nutrition is such a massive lever to pull. But I think that's one of the things that we've both really figured out the last year is dude, it could be so basic. And I think because there's so many choices, it's so difficult to bounce from thing to thing. Where if all you did was shoot for 10 to 15,000 steps a day, which is probably an additional 500 to 800 calories burned. and just pick some type of like resistance training, whether it's CrossFit, whether it's Barry's boot camp, whether it's bodybuilding style training at the gym, whether it's a personal trainer, whatever that program is, if you stick to something and you get those steps in and then you get the protein dominant foods dialed, dude, you're going to be unrecognizable in 6 months.
Yeah, totally. I mean, Einstein said the eighth wonder of the world is compounding. And I think most people, when they enter the health and wellness space, they're looking to bite off more than they can chew,
Yeah.
make the complete change overnight, which works. But I think it really takes a select person to make that work. If you're looking for the long-term, you know, transformation that lasts forever, it's just small things. It's like 20 minutes on the elliptical in the morning that you like just don't miss. And like that's like your movement to get your day started.
Yeah.
Or, you know, just like really being mindful of, you know, where you're getting your food from, cooking your meals, things like that. Like I just think the little things are where it compounds the most.
Yeah. So you're kind of looking for like what are the big levers to pull
Yeah.
where if I cover those levers, I'll be good. But then also if I start pulling these big levers first, I'll naturally want to gravitate towards these smaller levers. So what I mean by that is like, I think if all you did was shoot for the amount of sleep that you need, a lot of people say 8 to 9 hours. I think some people operate really well off of 6. I do
Yeah.
pretty well off of 6. I know you do really well off a low amount of sleep. The amount of sleep that you need, gram of protein per pound of body weight, ideally from an animal-based source. Source your food super well, 15,000 steps a day. Cook a lot of your meals, bang heavy weights. I think if you just do those 4 to 5 things, all these other micro levers to pull of around like electrolyte consumption, supplementation, blue light blocking glasses, all these other pieces will fall to place. But if all you did was cover those big bases, dude, if you just do those for 3 months, like
Yeah.
you will do whatever you want.
Yeah, I really think of it too as you need to get that momentum going and feel like the biggest leap in your health is going to come from you making those big change or little changes in the big areas that, you know, it gets you a little extra sleep, you feel more rested, or you're just going to bed and waking up at the same time. I think that's actually more important than getting more sleep. Like just go to bed at 10 and wake up at 4 every single day. Your body just gets in that rhythm. And, you know, that's 6 hours of sleep, but, you know, like you can operate really well off that as long as you're getting to bed at the same time.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think just simplifying the equation in general for most people is challenging though, because, you know, everyone has different things going on in their life. So I think really trying to prioritize these things early in the morning too is key. I don't know how you feel about that. Just like when do you kind of implement some of this stuff from like a daily perspective, and then like even like just thinking about some of this stuff on a weekly basis, like, you know, should I be prepping my meals? I know you've done some meal prep stuff, but, you know, time blocking is definitely really important. So you get this stuff done and you feel the benefits of it during the day.
Yeah. It's such a good point. And then there's the questions around, well, do I go in the morning? But then Huberman or these other people say, oh, I should really sleep. And then I actually will lift heavier in the afternoon. I think we all intuitively know the way that we're wired. I think both of us share that similarity. And this is something I've taken a lot from you, or you inspired me. Like, I don't really care what the science says. I know that if I can get some type of a workout in, I don't care if it's weights, I don't care if it's cardio, I don't care if it's a combination of both. Even if I'm not as well rested as I would like to be, that's going to set me up for so much success, because then I've already put that big win on the scoreboard. And then and that momentum is going to take me throughout the rest of my day where, you know, I feel like I'm more productive and more enthusiastic at work, getting more out of my day. And then maybe I'll carry that momentum in where I'll get like an additional workout in the afternoon, where if I don't get that workout in the morning, I just feel like I'm trying to play catch up all day long. And then the excuses just compound. But if you're not a morning person, don't push a square peg into to a round hole. The only caveat I would say is that if you think that you're not a morning person, but there's something inside of you that's like, damn, I would love to be that person that could wake up early and go to the gym, I think that that's something you need to think about and explore. And it's 100% possible if you could just do it for 3 days. And I think that the key is, you hinted at it, I think what pros do is I think pros set an alarm to go to bed. and then they just put their phone in the corner of the room and they get off their phone by a certain time. Like if you can get to bed at 9 o'clock, anyone can wake up at 4 o'clock in the morning. I
You'll
really believe that.
Oh, 100%. You'll be waking up whistling Dixie. What do you think about this frame of looking at health through the lens of like an artist versus a scientist? And the scientist is the person who's over indexing, like counting every single thing. It's good. It can definitely be effective. But then the artist is someone who's just mastered certain processes and they just like, they've gotten to the point where they can just weave this stuff naturally into their lifestyle. Does that make sense to you?
It does. I think I think in the beginning there is benefit to taking a more scientific approach.
Mm-hmm.
So for me, like actually understanding caloric intake, grams of saturated fat in certain foods, the amount of calories I was consuming, what was I burning, like just having a smartwatch has always been super helpful for that. It kind of just bakes that mindfulness into it. Cause like at the end of the day, I think that thermodynamics do apply. So you could eat the most nutrient dense foods ever, but if you're eating 4,500 calories of ground beef and raw milk and eggs, but you're only burning 2,600, you are going to put weight on too. So I think just understanding those thermodynamics and the science and your resting heart rate and the amount of steps that you're getting, that's great. But I think the goal over time is to kind of like intuitively become an artist, where you start to be able to like eyeball your plate and be like, all right, this is the amount of fat that I need. This is the amount of food that's going to make me full. This is the amount that's going to nourish me. I could go to the gym and kind of just like wing a workout because I understand what muscle groups go together. And then if you ever deviate off that path, the science is always there to pull you back on the path.
Mm. Yeah, I really like that. I'm thinking about just the artist, like how does like amazing artist become an artist? And it's just repetition, but they do have that consistency around the process of what they're doing. Like I don't think you wouldn't find any artist who doesn't have some quirky little things that they do that are part of their like, I'm gonna get myself in the right space to just do all the things the right way. And then it just comes very naturally. And I think where we're trying to steer people is become the artist of this whole experience of becoming healthier. Like you should have the capacity to free ball and eyeball, most of the meals that you're eating. And like, you shouldn't think twice about it,
Yeah.
I really just love the idea of living without this feeling of shame or guilt or just like too much over indexing. Like I think it's good to accomplish certain things, and obviously like you need to measure certain things if you have certain goals, but I do think like the artist mindset just allows you to breathe life into other things outside of you just focusing on your health, which should be the backbone or the foundation of all the things that you're doing.
Yeah. To your point, just being able to ask yourself the question in the morning, at night, throughout the course of your day, maybe it's once a week, maybe it's once a month, like, do I feel good or do I not feel good? If I'm doing a carnivore diet, but my energy level sucks and I don't have any pop to wake up in the morning and I don't really feel like my lifts are good and my arms feel flat and my guts kind of messed up, okay, well, maybe you shouldn't keep pigeonholing yourself to that diet. Like, do you care more about the identity of fitting into this group or this animal-based group, or do you just care about feeling good as much as possible? Like the reason why I love carnivore is because it really worked for me. But if it didn't work for me, I wouldn't have identified as a carnivore. And I don't know, I think it's just a mental thing of like, I think a lot of people, and we know so many people that have successfully done carnivore long term. I think as I'm getting older, I'm realizing that I think it's an amazing tool. And I think, yeah, you could absolutely thrive on a carnivore diet, but there are so many amazing foods that are out there that if you do have autoimmune or something long term that's been plaguing you and you're able to correct that and get the inflammation out of your system, I think that it's important to experiment with different food groups because other foods are amazing. And why would you deprive yourself of those things if you don't have to?
Totally. I think so much of it too, just we've recently been working on a project with a new butcher grocery store concept in town called Radius. And he's hyper focused on the sourcing and getting really high quality ingredients and finding the best sources for all the different food groups out there, beef, raw milk, chicken. And what I've learned through that process is just knowing like how most food is made and how that food is procured and made. there's such a wide range in terms of quality out there. So I do feel like we are fighting a bit of an uphill battle when it comes to quality, but I do think that, some people have probably experimented with the same food group and gotten like different results. And I think that it's just important to continue down that path of just exploration and really trying to educate yourself on where your food is coming from. Like ultimately, I think the best thing you can do for your health is buy locally and cook most of your meals. Very hard to do that. A lot of that. I think there's a lot of barriers for most people. But if you can do that, it will introduce you to the concept of just like knowing how that animal's been raised. And I do think that does help in the long run.
Yeah. Yeah, there's people that will like die on the hill that vegetables are toxic. And we've done episodes on this before. I think there's people that will die on the hill that animals are toxic. I think the hill that I'm willing to die on is that the food system is broken. There's way too much consolidation, monopolization. I think the meat packing industry is broken too. I think that everyone should make an effort to source the best quality food locally where you have a direct relationship with your rancher. I think everyone should make an effort to prioritize animal protein and get enough animal protein and enough nutrients that work for your specific body. Again, it's like I think a gram of protein per pound of body weight is amazing for people. I'll die on the hill around getting 10 to 15,000 steps a day. I'll die on the hill of everyone resistance training, regardless of your age, especially if you're getting older. Grip strength is so important. So being
Hmm.
able to improve that is actually a longevity predictor. And I'll die on the hill that healing and getting healthy there's also a mental, spiritual component that is impossible to quantify by traditional science. And until you make that mental belief that you can heal or you can achieve the ideal body outcomes or the ideal hormone panels, I don't think you're going to achieve those things.
Mm.
But those are the hills that I'm the most passionate about because I think those are the biggest levers that will fix a lot of things for people.
Dude, we could have just summarized the whole podcast in that
Are there
clip.
any
No, it's money.
Are there any levers that I missed that you?
Man, that was so well said. I don't think so. I think you hit the nail on the head. I do want to like emphasize the spiritual component of getting healthier because there should be changes that happen to you as a person, not just physically, as you start getting healthier. I'm just envisioning even just like a version of myself, 5 to 10 years ago, where I wasn't doing all the things that I wanted to do in life and my health was suffering from it. And it's more of a spiritual conversation where, and we were talking about it before, like there's fear in the food system and how we're kind of being educated on it. And I think that the less you can allow fear to enter into your life in general, the better. So you overcome that through taking ownership and learning that we do have so much agency over all of these things. And we don't need to necessarily have all the answers, but the biggest thing that we can do is just continuing to keep our aim on, day by day, getting better and better. And then what I've experienced is that as you see change happen, you just have more energy to pour into the other buckets and start to make better decisions about, things that you were fearful of before. I think like there's just an empowering nature of getting better, feeling better. And then ultimately that is just like an uplift to your entire spirit, how you treat people, your energy throughout the day, the things that you're able to invest into. It's all transformed just by how you treat your body.
Yeah, there's this interesting dichotomy even with almost like this like holistic living movement. And I think the ethos of it is so good of like, all cotton and wool clothing, really good quality regenerative beef, mitigating your exposure to 5G, wearing blue light blocking glasses, consuming everything out of glass, not consuming tap water. It's like those principles are so good in practice. And if you can implement as many of those as possible, that's amazing. But at the end of the day, it's like you can wear all the cotton and linen clothing that you want. If you want to go to Italy and enjoy a trip or go to Dubai, like you're going to be getting on an airplane, you're going to be in the airport, you're going to be exposed to blue light. There's probably going to be periods of your life where you're not able to drink out of that glass bottle. And that's where I think resilience comes into play. Just like accepting the stakes that because of the way we've evolved as human beings, perfection is impossible. It is off the table. So
Yeah.
I would rather be resilient and be as healthy as I can be and accept the fact that I am going to be exposed to some of these things. Um, And I'm actually okay with that because I'm just taking all my power back in these other things.
I love it. Is there anything you wanted to touch on this topic of just like clearing the fog? Anything else there that stands out to you as important? Any other pillars that that we didn't talk about? Because I have a
You
topic
have a
that I want to throw out there. It's a little bit related, but it's more
little mix and mash.
yeah.
I think that overall we're heading in the right direction. I think that because there are so many non-credentialed people in the space, including ourselves, I think there's a yin and a yang to it
Mm,
where I think the negative is that you have people that can really optimize for the algorithm and there is a lot of fear mongering. And there's frankly probably just some misinformation that's being spread there too. And then the yin, the positive of that is that this whole alternative health movement, all these different practices, modalities, legalization of raw milk, connecting with local farmers, waking up to what's going on, that's also a byproduct of this space too. So again, it's like there's more optionality, there's more choices than ever before, and then you just pick those things and implement them into your big levers, and just let yourself compound that eighth wonder of the world that you're talking about, and you'll be unrecognizable in 6 to 12 months,
dude,
guaranteed.
100%. 100%. I think it's also keeping your North Star. Like, there's always going to be more things that you can incorporate in, but just continue to focus on those basics.
Yeah, for me, it's always just like if we've said the thing about success is a feeling of your head hitting the pillow, but also, dude, the best feeling in the world is loving what you see in the mirror and just continuing to move in the right direction where maybe you finally got yourself serious and you started weighing yourself every single day. And maybe all you did that 1 week of eating really clean and going to the gym again is like you lost a pound or a pound and a half or like a little bit of water weight or something. It's like, dude, those roots are planting under the soil
Hmm.
and you can't see it. But if you just let yourself compound, you will become like transformation is possible. I just think we've forgotten that God has literally created us with the ability to transform, not get incrementally better, but we all have the capability to transform. And I think that's so cool.
It's unbelievable.
Yeah.
Yeah, seeing people take control of their health. Like I love when I see a friend and they've just come back and they're just in like totally different. They look totally different.
Yeah.
They have lost a bunch of weight. You can see their mood is elevated. They're just in a totally different mental state. And it's like, man, that was all accessible to you this whole time.
Yeah. Their aura, their posture. A lot of people, it's like the eyes, the way that the look
Mm,
in their eyes changes too.
totally.
You can just feel it.
Oh, the eyes are definitely where I feel like most people's health, you can just kind of like look into their eyes and see whether or not they're radiating that energy or not.
Definitely.
All right, the topic that I wanted to throw out there, Mr. Beast's Lunchables, Lunchly.
Yes.
So I'm curious to get your take on this. We haven't talked about this at all, and it's a total total left turn of this conversation, but I feel like it's on topic this week, so I wanted to touch on it. What are your takes on what they did with the Lunchable?
Um, well, I just think that when you look at the body of work, more so of Logan Paul, but there is some stuff with Mr. Beast. When I looked at that post on Twitter and I saw the three of them, the first thing I thought of was satanic, to be honest with you,
Mm,
where it's like you have three guys that have built unbelievable personal brands. They have so many 10 to 21-year-olds looking up to them and admiring them. And like, imagine if they had the stones to be like, hey, we're actually going to create like a better for you version of Lunchables or hydration, et cetera. And they just they just resorted to taking a Lunchable concept that works and is extremely profitable. They're saying it's healthier, but if you look at the ingredients, they're complete dog shit. And they're just pushing it on kids and just going for the quick buck. And I guess from a capitalist perspective, they have every right to do that. I don't know. The word that came to my head was satanic.
yeah, even the colors. I'm like, they're just like trying to lure you in with these like flashy colors, the neons and all that. I saw so Mr. Beast commented under a tweet and he was saying that oh, this is a better for you version of the Lunchable. And like in some ways it is, but I really do think it begs the question, like, guys, you could have gone so much further with this. Um, so yeah, it's frustrating because I feel like there's this whole message that like it is healthier in very, very small ways. Like,
Do you know Anything in particular about the ingredients that you observed
So
that looks healthier than like a traditional Lunchable?
so it's lower in sugar,
Yep.
lower in calories, um, which doesn't necessarily innately make it any healthier.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and then they made it with real cheese,
Okay.
and Lunchables can't even call their cheese. So I guess that's a step in the right direction.
Cheese-like substance.
Yeah. But then you look at the ingredients and it's, like I think sunflower oil, and just like all these artificial flavors, and the prime drink in general is just like loaded with crap. So yeah, it makes me wonder, they basically saw the opportunity like, hey, Lunchables are cheap and not healthy for you at all. Can we move the needle like 10% better, healthier, and just market it as it is a healthy Lunchable when really it's close to the same crap.
Yeah. Like, again, slight incremental tweets, but those guys, all three of them have the pockets where if they really wanted to come out and make a statement and do something with grass-fed jerky and grass-fed cheese and like a truly beneficial hydration drink with a good, like a true electrolyte profile of sodium, magnesium, potassium, they could 100% do it. And the thing is like in this capital freedom driven society that we live in, I guess in theory, they have every right to do that. We could obviously go down the rabbit hole around like food regulations and replicating Europe. The way that I view it is you just have to make a decision of, as a man, do I want to stack the bag or do I want to actually make real impact and be an embodiment of what God has created us to be and just be a good steward of his creation on this earth? And it's easy to armchair quarterback and say that, but I think as I get older, these things are just black or white. It's like, do you want to just stack the bag and make money? You can do that. Or do you want to do you want to actually try and drive change? And you can also stack the bag by doing that too. The margins might be lower, it might be slower, but I would rather be a steward of God and the amazing world that he's like programmed to be a part of and just try and be a leader.
Yeah. Yeah. I think I wanted to tie this into the fog conversation just around health and wellness too, because I do think there is some fog like in the marketing angles that some of these brands take where it's like they're labeling that as healthy, but it's not nearly better enough to call it healthy.
Yes. Yeah. Just because you're taking a dog shit product and making it slightly less dog shit, it's still shit.
Yeah. Yeah, it's exciting because I feel like these conversations, like when the product launched, I think like 5 years ago, that product might have been like way more well received. It got so much pushback. Like so many people were commenting underneath it. It was mostly negative. So it's cool to just see the consciousness of what people are aware of and talking about when it comes to health has been elevated to the point where it's like, I don't think that, and hey, maybe they do just like come in and wipe Lunchables off the market. I don't know. Maybe, and if they're just replacing Lunchables, hey, that might be a marginal win. But I still think the conversation is just so much further down the field that people need to be having when it comes to getting healthier.
Yeah. A lot of people probably don't know this, but before we had ever ideated on a product, the first thing that you and I ever talked about was like a better for you, like a truly better for you Lunchable for kids that incorporates, grass-fed jerky or biltong, some grass-fed cheese, some nuts, some type of beverage that's actually like hydrating and nourishing for kids. And I still think that there's massive potential in that. So maybe I'm just speaking this into life in the future, but I couldn't think of anything more important. Like if you nourish your kids with the right food and you help them develop a relationship with God at an early age, I think a lot of these problems that we're facing at a macro level just will disappear.
Definitely. Yeah, teaching your kids those basic, just like who are you and how to operate, how do you want to operate in the world?
Yeah.
On just like a basic level of just taking care of yourself is so important.
Yeah. What do you think about you just made me think about it with just some of these ingredients. I really go back and forth on just food regulation in general. Like it even makes me think about, I was asked this question on our buddy Shane Larson's podcast around Florida's decision to ban lab grown meat. They took a page out of Italy's playbook. You see Europe banning these certain ingredients that are legalized in the US. It's like, it's a not an easy question to answer, I would say.
Yeah, I think the problem starts with the incentives on the food production side of things. Yeah, like I don't want them to be able to regulate away red meat. So why would I allow them to regulate away Beyond Meat? So from that standpoint, I don't want my government to be able to tell me what I can and can't
Mhm.
eat. But then on the back end, you're seeing these ultra processed foods basically being subsidized by the government's dollars because they're incentivizing people to grow corn, soy, wheat, the cheapest ingredients possible. And then those are getting sold to these big food companies that are then making highly processed, ultra palatable, ultra processed foods. So from that perspective, I think that's part of the beauty of living in the United States where like, these states can regulate some of these things and come in and intercede. Like I definitely want there to be a world without like Beyond Meat. Like
Yeah.
I don't think there's a utility for it. And there wouldn't be a utility for it if we didn't have this broken incentive system on the back end and broken monetary system where I mean they just received so much funding from so many people on this pipe dream that they're going to be able to convince large amounts of people that this vegan diet is the only way to be healthy and that in order to reduce your climate footprint you need to stop eating cows. You need to go and start eating only food from an industrial factory that, isn't proving that it's any more climate friendly at all. And they're using massive amounts of input. So it's a much more industrialized process in order to live that way. But they're trying to convince you that, hey, this is the healthy way to live. And that industrialized system to me is just so much less healthy. And I just don't see it in a free market. Like all those products have gone to zero.
Yeah.
You've seen them all go public, raise tons of money, throw so many celebrity marketing dollars behind every single brand, and all of them have ended up in the gutter. It's like there's just not a market for it. So I do think at the end of the day, the free market speaks, and that's the beauty of what Shane's kind of alluding to is like, yeah, that stuff. People are at least aware enough. So I have hope that people are aware enough to spread this information so that people don't fall for it. But yeah, there's definitely a part of me that gets excited about the idea of, someone banning lab grown meat. But I think if I'm being honest with myself, the idea of banning foods is against what I believe in.
Yeah.
I just believe, this goes back to like the raw milk conversation. It's like regulations around raw milk are so backwards and I think a lot of that just got twisted up in a lot of complicated problems. They were looking for a short-term fix to milk getting industrialized in a lot of ways. And in that industrialization process, the milk was not good. It got a lot of people sick. They started pasteurizing milk. Raw milk got demonized. And then from that point forward, raw milk has just become this bastardized stepchild to the dairy industry because the dairy industry now is so much bigger than the raw milk industry. They have all the lobbying dollars to keep their incentives, flowing towards pasteurized dairy, making it seem like raw milk's unsafe. But raw milk in actuality is one of God's most amazing creations. It's such an incredible food. So, long-winded way of saying, I think regulation in food is really, really tricky. I would be pro none of it. I think we had an amazing conversation with Joel Salatin about this. Just regulation. I think we asked him the question. I think I asked him straight up, "Hey, if you were elected as the secretary of, the FDA, what would you do?" And he said, "Oh, I just shut it down." Lit- Literally, he just said he would just shut it down. So I think there's something to that.
Mm. I think that's well said. Uh, I think my brain is in a blender right now because I'm just thinking how easy it is to buy hot Cheetos
Yeah,
and how hard it is to get raw milk, even in a state like Texas,
yeah,
where we could go to 10 convenience stores 5 minutes away, get hot Cheetos like it's nothing. And then even with raw milk, the closest raw dairy farm is probably 45 minutes away. And then even at these places in Austin, you can get it. They're just pickup points. Like you can't sell it out of an actual retail store. Like just the difficulty of getting a single ingredient product that's made by cows, that's made by God, versus something that is probably going to cause metabolic dysfunction, autoimmune disease, et cetera. Like, I don't know, it just it boggles my mind.
yeah. Well, the subterranean element of that, the area that like most people don't see, is just like so many government dollars are going towards those Cheetos being made without without Cheetos necessarily receiving any of those dollars.
Mm.
Those dollars are going towards the farmers who are making the raw ingredients for very cheap foods. And then those foods need to go somewhere.
Because corn is so subsidized, you're
Because
saying.
it's so subsidized, there's just there's a massive trade-off to, you can sell a bag of Cheetos for what, like 99 cents or like, $1.50, whatever it is. It's insanely cheap to make that. If you had to actually make that without government dollars backing it up, like the whole economics behind the system would flip.
Yeah.
Those Cheetos would be a lot more expensive. And then you would be making decisions based on, all right, this $5 bag of Cheetos makes me feel like crap. And I can go get a steak and then maybe, people are feeling better. This is my like utopian vision of the future. It's like we get rid of a lot of the incentives that are steering people towards highly processed foods and start to subsidize regenerative farming that allows for minimal inputs. So, no chemicals, no herbicides, pesticides, anything like that. And there's an abundance of product that ends up flooding the market that's good, and prices kind of self-regulate from there.
Mm.
So like these really high quality ingredients that make people feel great are then ultimately more available at a lower price. But I do think that like we're like very numb to the industrialized food system at this point, where convenience is just such a hard thing to just like replace. Like the fact that you can just go to the grocery store and get really cheap food is really, it's a luxury. It is a convenience. It's amazing in a lot of ways, and really is a great thing. But also, the convenience is part of the problem. It's a big part of the problem.
If the convenience is poison, that's a problem.
Yeah.
And so you just touched on like probably the most fundamental piece to this. And I think a lot of people don't understand this because the margins are so tight for a lot of farmers. If they're growing certain crops, notably corn, wheat, soy, a few other things, they're legitimately being subsidized. They're incentivized by the government to grow those things. And that then fuels this entire industrialized food model. What's fascinating is that there are really no subsidies at all. I don't think there are any subsidies that encourage regenerative practices, which is so crazy because anyone that knows anything about regenerative knows that it's the most nutrient-dense product that's going to nourish the consumer. And it's also potentially the secret that's going to ultimately fix the environment and be able to like sequester all this carbon out of the atmosphere that we've polluted into it. And I remember Will Harris from White Oak Pastures, he wrote that amazing blog post where he applied for this environmental grant.
Mm-hmm.
And he had this like regenerative sheep grazing program that incorporated solar panels. It was super interesting. He didn't get it. Microsoft got it. Target got it. All these massive companies got it.
Yeah.
So I understand why RFK is so attractive, because you're like, you have this guy that has absolute balls and he understands regenerative practices. Like I would be so like, what happens to the food system over 10 years if regenerative practices are actually like heavily subsidized by the government? That's fascinating to think about, like those ripple effects from that.
Well, the model would flip on its head. Which I think for most people, there's so much money at stake that a lot of people are, I think, like willfully pessimistic because they just don't believe that world can ever exist. And they are partially being compensated and benefiting from some of the things that are existing in this comfy world that we live in. So the idea of creating that change in that real food system, I think, is a little bit it is daunting. Like there would be so many cascading positive effects if we could incentivize regenerative practice. I mean, people would quit their job if we were incentivizing people, hey, here's $100,000 to go start a small homestead in, whatever state it is. I mean, that could feed small communities everywhere. And when we talk about like food deserts and stuff, like we have a massive problem with certain parts of the world, certain parts of the US just not having any access to any food, almost any food at all, but any high quality food. So I think like from that perspective, if we start incentivizing some of these things, it will flip the system. Like the system, I hope it, it will be like a slow transition, but it will move so much money and attention away from ultra processed foods towards the real stuff.
Yeah, it would be interesting, like to be a fly on the wall in a closed door conversation between RFK and Trump, and to see if he could bend Trump's ear and get him interested in regenerative agriculture and breaking up the big packers and stuff like that. I would be so curious how he feels about that. It's probably similar to his perspective on Bitcoin, because we were fortunate we were able to go to the Bitcoin conference in Nashville this year, and him being there was just like such a massive statement of a former US president being there. I don't think he knew much about Bitcoin at
No.
all, but just him like being there and being engaged with the crowd and trying to learn, I think was awesome. And I'm guessing his perspective on regenerative agriculture is probably similar to Bitcoin, where he knows it's good. I just don't think he understands the logistics maybe of what makes it tick. And I could be completely wrong. That's just a pure assumption.
Yeah, and I think RFK is kind of like a Trojan horse in a lot of ways. Like
Unbelievably so.
if he could get into if he can get into close quarters with what the Trump administration could do, and he actually had Trump's ear and could implement some of those changes, I mean, I would be incredibly optimistic for what the next 20 years could look like. It's really interesting though, because I still feel like there's on both sides of the aisle, there are just so many people who are captured by big industries that are really hard to change. Like the dairy industry. Like, what do you think the dairy industry votes? I bet you they lean far right, or not far right, but I bet you it's like 70-30 maybe.
Yeah.
So like that industry is going to be lobbying for Trump to like hush up this whole conversation around raw milk. Like they don't necessarily they're not incentivized to want that to happen. So that, just making that point, because I think it's just like wading through this bureaucratic system that we have where all these industries feel incredibly protected by just the amount of dollars that they spend on lobbying and making sure that, no policies change. We don't want it. We don't want any policies to change, because that would completely disrupt our business. But I think RFK has the spirit of like wanting to break some of that stuff up.
I don't know of another political candidate where, he's been to White Oak Pastures. He's been to Mark McAfee's raw farm.
Totally.
He's talking about vegetable oil. He's in amazing shape. Like, if that doesn't fire you up and get you encouraged, like, I don't know what will.
Yeah.
And what we're talking about is such a non-political issue that both parties should be so passionate about, when the cost of our healthcare system is 16% of our US GDP. Like, when you think about cutting costs on a P&L, like, why would you not start there, especially knowing that a lot of this stuff is highly preventable too?
Yeah. Like you're basically asking the people of this country to like take control of their lives, to some extent. Like you're basically saying, there are going to be healthcare costs that are just unavoidable. Getting older, you break a bone, you get in a car accident, whatever it is, those things relatively unavoidable. Those are going to happen. But the stuff that's really concerning is the stuff that's rising the fastest is chronic disease and obesity related illnesses that are largely preventable and are largely just a product of industrialized food.
Yeah.
So,
yeah, I think a lot about our future generation, and there's like the one version of the 5-year-old that has a bowl of Fruit Loops and he's numbed on an iPad. And I'm very interested to see where that 5-year-old turns out in 30 plus years. And then there's also the 5-year-old who's raised in a household of steak and eggs and maybe reading a book, or he's outside playing as he should be as a child. And I'm very interested to see where that cohort grows to be in 30 years. And I think the question is like, which version of that ends up becoming normalized, I think will probably dictate the direction of where we go as a country.
Yeah, I think the realist in me sees a parallel economy being built alongside of the existing system that, in this parallel economy, we're focused on like keeping people healthy, preventative healthcare, incentivizing the right things. A lot of the ethos that we hear when we talk about things with our like Bitcoin friends is just like, personal ownership. And, I think a lot of those trends too will be like maybe not vaccinating your kids as soon as, giving them the 72 vaccines or whatever it is, is within their first 2 years of life. Do they need all those things? Questioning a lot of the incentives in the insurance model. Like we talked to Andy over at Crowd Health. Why do we need to be subsidizing this insurance model, which is kind of the wrapper around the entire system that we live in right now? Like it keeps that whole thing in check. why do we need to be subsidizing that and paying, $900 a month out of our paychecks when we could be paying $150 and then $150 a month? And then, when those incidents do happen, you've created a system that can support those costs. So I think that there will be kind of a parallel, like almost a schism that you could delineate back to COVID, where there's kind of just more or less two camps, and the one camp will continue to compound in one direction and the other camp will continue to compound in the other direction. I think, uh, to me, that seems like a more realistic outcome than the existing system completely overhauling and changing and going fully regenerative.
Mm. Yeah, it'll be fascinating to see over the next 5 to 10 years if we can pull back from the brink and course correct, or is America, our buddy Nick brought this up, is America just too big to be able to pull in a lot of these principles that our founding fathers kind of baked into this country when we were far smaller? It's
Yeah.
an interesting question.
Yeah. I think it's about not letting the idea of America die, but the current model of America is just, I don't think the founding fathers would even, they'd be like, I have no idea how to relate to this. Like, this is so different than what we had envisioned. There's so many positive aspects of it, the freedoms that we have. This is the best country in the world to be born into. But just like the political climate right now, the current state of health of a lot of people, I really do feel like the wake up call has happened, and people are either going to wake up and really start to like think about getting out and starting to write their own path, follow systems that are actually healthy and make sense, or you're just going to be subject to a system that is like very much wanting to control and keep this population sick and unhealthy so that they can profit off it. It's kind of dark, kind of black pill, but yeah.
I think it's good to play out the different possibilities too. And I think the important thing is like, you're alive, you're living. 1776 really wasn't that long ago.
Dude, it wasn't long ago.
And you
at
can
all.
change everything within, not everything, but you can really move the needle in 5 to 10 years too. And just realizing that if you're listening to this and us having this conversation, you play a part, you have a vote, and your ripple effect that you can have in your local community or with your family or with your friend group can be insane. And I think just we need more leaders. I think we need bolder people. I think we need more courage and just people that are confident speaking the truth and not worrying about the negative repercussions that could come from that. Because if we don't speak up, what does the future look like in 10 years?
Yeah.
I don't think it's good.
100%. Yeah, I think about how all this conversation relates back to you and me too. Like what we're doing in Austin. Like I almost want to just like cast our umbrella to Austin because I think we can make such a big impact just here. And then that impact can be shared in other cities by replicating the model. But like, I really just want to focus on the people that I see on a daily basis, investing into good conversation with people, leading people in the right direction, like just having the impact on the local level to me is so much more important than getting lost in kind of what's happening all across the US. Like there's just so much noise. Again, coming back to the original like idea of this podcast, which was like the fog that's out there in the nutrition space. There's just so much noise in general. And I think just trying to like really be people who are willing to like stand out, boldly lead, invite people in, create community, like those types of things can change a city. And I think changing a city could change everything.
Yeah. I mean, you think about where we started, because this I would say this is like a small to niche show. So on a good month, it's 35,000 downloads, right? So think about like when we first started, you're just putting out content into the ether and almost no one was seeing it. It's spread to the point where, there's 35,000 people, give or take, that could listen on a monthly basis. But the ripples of those people that are consuming this content and making changes and spreading that, dude, that could be over 100,000 people a month from our show, let alone these massive podcasts that exist. Even with our journey with faith, we've talked about this 10 times, but our triathlon coach, Natasha, told us we should start going to church. You started going to Thrive in Austin when I was living in San Diego. You went super consistent, had this incredible transformation, got rebaptized. And now with the first appointment, you've probably had 100 different guys come over the last year, probably a lot more than that. And think about the ripples that's created too. So I think we just play down a little bit of like, what difference could I really make? And when you look at it from a ripple exponential perspective, dude, this could be culture changing stuff, which is why it's so important for everyone listening and just get in the game. Whatever get in the game means to you. Maybe it's just sharing a podcast that you think is impactful, or inviting someone to church, or buying a grass-fed steak and giving it as a welcome present to your friend that just moved into their new house instead of a bottle of wine or a jar of beef tallow. Like these little ripples, dude, end up creating massive momentum.
Yeah. I think about, I don't know. I feel like a lot of times I'm speaking to a version of myself, several years back that felt a little bit more stagnant. Like I wasn't initiating a whole lot of just meaningful, fruitful things in my life that I think now we're just in full builder mode. And that's like really all we see. Like there's just so many things that we've just spent time and energy trying to build. And there's just like, even through the podcast, we have so many people that we can connect with and invest in, and through Noble, same thing. And so it's like, I just ultimately at the end of the day want to like see these changes and transformation happen, but they don't happen unless you initiate. Like initiating the contact of reaching out to a friend to invite them to go for a run, and then you have a good conversation with them and it changes their whole week. Like let those things like be an initiator, and let those things compound over a long enough period of time. And you'll just see this network of people that have somehow come into your life because you've initiated just simple invitations to, hey, come to this cookout we're doing. Hey, come to this run we're doing. Hey, I want you to be a part of, the business that we're building. So many things that can just like come together through simple initiation and invitations.
One of the things I've been praying for, you just made me think of this, is based on our buddy Sean, who spoke at our Bible study. I've been praying to be I'm like, please, Lord, I don't want to be a spectator anymore. Please just let me be a laborer. And if you're listening to this, like having that mindset, I think everyone should pray for that. And dude, having that mindset shift of spectator to laborer, all it takes is one laborer, dude, to change everything.
Dude.
So be a laborer.
Yeah. The harvest is plenty.
Harvest is plenty, dude.
Yeah.
Well, bro, I think that wraps it up for today, my man.
It's been great.
Good combo. Talked about a lot. Again, life is amazing.
Dude.
Love doing this
only
with
up
you.
here. Only up from here, man. The show, I think where we're at with the show is so fun. Like taking a little bit of the pressure off, you and me just doing more one-on-one episodes. Like I couldn't love this more.
Dude, appreciate you, brother. Until next time.
All right, brother. All right.